Welcome back to Vivi in the Valley, where we explore innovation, not just for technology's sake, but for human spirit. And this is Crypto for Good, the series where we uncover how blockchain can create real impact beyond speculation. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest challenges in the Ethereum ecosystem, rollup fragmentation, and how it's holding back the very future Ethereum was designed to enable. My guest today is a computer scientist who's dedicated his work at the core of Ethereum's scaling journey. After helping build Scroll, one of the earliest ZK rollups, he's now leading the mission to unify Ethereum's fracture layer 2 landscape through something called real-time proving. It's fast, it's secure, and it's a big bet on a better future, a better user experience for everyone in Web3. I know this episode is going to be a little bit technical, but beyond the deep tech, we'll explore how decentralized systems, when designed right, can serve real users. Now let's welcome Orest Tarasiuk, co-founder and CTO of T1 Protocol. Orest, welcome to the show.
Vivi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored.
Great. So as we mentioned, you were part of the early engineering team at Scroll, working on ZK rollups. Actually, before most people even understood what they were, right? Can you walk us through that journey, and what did you learn from that experience, and what eventually led you to start T1?
Of course. I'm a computer scientist by training, and I've been this, free and open source software loving kind of nerd ever since I've been a teenager, basically. And so Bitcoin and later Ethereum were on my radar as exemplars of where free and open source software actually works, and of this like bottom-up way of structuring not just projects and companies, but potentially even bigger social constructs. And yet I always viewed this as a hobby, as one of 10 things in my life on the side. And I went on and founded what I call a real startup, a non-crypto startup, some 10 years ago. And after a couple of years, my co-founder and we decided to move on. And he had been bothering me about looking at Ethereum, looking at ZK specifically for a while. But I figured, he's a theoretical physics PhD. This might be something slightly too theoretical, too far disjoint, removed from the daily engineering reality that I'm all about. So I didn't listen to him. And so he went on and joined Ethereum Foundation to do sharding research. And I went on and founded another company. That company, he became an angel investor. And sometime later, we decided to actually close shop. And we told him, hey, Dankrat, please write off your check. This isn't working out. And so for the 10th time did he annoy me with ZK and Ethereum. And I actually ended up looking at it. And I figured, oh my gosh, this is real. And ZK is huge and I love it. And it seems like it has the potential to revolutionize a lot of technology and not just blockchains. And actually to this day, I believe that ZK could be bigger than blockchains. And so I decided to join Scroll and ended up working on indeed scaling Ethereum, and by which I would mean, as a computer scientist, rendering the system such that as you add users, the desirable properties of the system remain intact or only deteriorate sublinearly in the added users, which was not the case for Ethereum at the time, and which Scroll wanted to fix with zero-knowledge proofs used for integrity and used for basically offloading computation from the chain, compressing it with the ZKP and pasting it back on the chain, with the ambition of keeping or restoring low fees, but also with the ambition of keeping composability among other dApps living on Ethereum. And my argument is Scroll succeeded at the first part of what I call scalability, and what for many people is scalability. But it failed, unfortunately, as of now, to deliver on the second part, which many people used to neglect for quite some time, and which is only now showing to actually be very relevant. And that is, it resulted in a fragmented ecosystem where an app, a dApp that lives on Scroll, where you maybe can trade tokens, is on Scroll alone, unless you decide to bridge some arbitrary message from that dApp to the L1, but this bridging is gonna be expensive and most of all slow, even at infinite money budgets, because of slow ZKP generation times. And so if you want to trade a token on Scroll, use the result to take out a loan on Arbitrum, and then use the result of that to do something on ZK Sync, you will not be able to, because each step will be way too slow. And so to me, this is not a scalable system just yet. And so I decided to join forces with my co-founder, John, and as we set out on a journey to bringing about what people now call real-time proving, thinking mainly about ZK, and what we've been calling real-time proving for 1.5 years now, but thinking about a combination of ZK with faster and cheaper technology, specifically restaking, so crypto economic security, and TEE, so hardware security.
Okay, so that's great. We got a lot to unpack. And for our listeners and viewers who might not be so technical, I'm going to give a little bit of context, right? Ethereum currently relies on 3 major types of scaling solutions: ZK rollups, TEEs, and optimistic rollups. So those make transactions faster and cheaper, but they will also introduce fragmentation, like Orest mentioned, liquidity and applications that now scatter around many rollups that don't easily communicate. So that's what T1 aims to fix. So could you tell us what exactly is T1? And let's start from there.
Of course. So T1 is what the ZK rollup promised to be 4 years ago. So it's a way for you as a dApp developer to deploy your dApp to this chain where your users get to interact with your app at low cost, but they do not suffer from significantly lower security or from less liquidity or less user access or less composability with dApps that live somewhere else. And the way we reach this goal is via combining those cheaper and faster ways of proving integrity of computation that happens outside of Ethereum with ZKP, that's expensive and slow, but even more secure, in a way where within a T1 node, we are also running follow-on nodes for other rollups, such as Scroll or Arbitrum, and expose the ability to interact with those rollups in an asynchronous way to developers on T1.
So why is real-time proving, as you mentioned, why is it such a breakthrough?
It's a breakthrough because as soon as you have real-time proving, which I define to mean the ability of some off-chain system, of L1 chain system, such as a rollup, to convince the chain, to convince the L1 Ethereum blockchain about its state transition function within less than it takes to come up with a new block on Ethereum L1. Less time. So effectively, this means that in Ethereum block N, something can happen, and then this off-chain component of yours can react to it, act upon it, do some magic, whatever you want, and it will be able to convince Ethereum 12 seconds later, 1L1 block time later, about whatever it did to be correct. And why this is so important, why this is this kind of step function improvement is that to the L1, this is effectively zero delay, right? Because it doesn't know what's going on between its own blocks. So as soon as you are able to convince it of something, before the next block is prepared and added to the chain, will it look as though there was no delay at all? And so this opens up or restores really this original vision of Lego building blocks in decentralized finance and beyond applications, such that one dApp and one dApp developer be able to like do their own thing. And this is kind of the parallel I like to draw to the Linux world or the Unix world, where one small tiny tool is responsible for just its own job. And then you can trivially take the output of that tool and feed it into the input of another tiny, highly specialized, super small and fast tool. So you get to restore that composability, those Lego building blocks on the L1, as soon as you have RTP, real-time proving, for your off-chain component. And RTP is particularly difficult if you want to prove a lot of compute. So this is something that is right now beyond feasibility with respect to ZK, but it is possible and feasible, and in fact, live on our DevNet today with trusted execution environments.
That's wonderful. So in crypto, we often talk about trustlessness and verification. Vitalik recently proposed combining 2 of the 3 rollups to get the best of all worlds, ZKP, TE, optimistic. So as you described, T1 seems to have taken that idea further with real-time proving and also layered safeguards. So how do you see your model evolving that vision? And what are the trade-offs you have chosen to make it practical then?
Yes, so to be specific or to be precise, Vitalik's approach is slightly different. It uses TEEs as an additional factor, an additional prover in a 2 out of 3 system in order to increase security. What we do is we use TEEs in order to accelerate finality. So it's a slightly different goal. And we believe that this is indeed more urgently needed right now in the reality as it stands than added security, especially since the ZK systems out there are currently not trusted, even with the value that is secured in a rollups bridge, because this is still early technology and there's still a lot of bugs. And so, as to the best of my knowledge, none of the ZK rollups actually allow permissionless state root update. And so they either require the prover to be permissioned or the sequencer to be permissioned. So it's not possible to actually participate in this like ideal target world where we trust ZKPs for integrity. We don't trust them just yet.
Okay, so instead of relying on slow or risky bridges, T1 connects rollups directly using TEE, right?
Exactly, and some more security mechanisms, because TEEs alone can only be trusted with for blockchain contexts, a tiny amount of funds.
But could you break things down a little bit for our listeners, like the main technologies behind your system? We have TEE and other core components. Could you just walk us through the major technologies?
Of course. So basically, the idea is we have 3 levels of what you could call maybe like tiered security. The first level, and this is the level that's live in our DevNet today, is just TEE proofs. Now, TEE proofs have this deficiency that with sufficient a budget, such as if you are a nation state, maybe with $1 million, even as low as that, is it expected that they be able to be compromised. And so you don't want to trust a lot of money, like more than maybe $1 million, with a TE. So on top of the TE layer, we add what we call crypto economic security, and that is made possible via rendering any execution that happens in our TE node deterministic. And that is actually a highly non-trivial problem for a computer scientist, because a lot of the stuff that's going on in our system is by nature non-deterministic. It depends on I/O. So you need to take precautions to render things such as calls to a co-located and yet still I/O dependent follower node for, say, Arbitrum that's running inside our node, such that you'd be able to add more TEs to the network and expect the other TEs, the other nodes, to come up with the exact same result or deal with disagreements gracefully, such that you'd be able to even hope to reach consensus. And so we did quite a bit of thinking about how to design those by nature non-deterministic calls in a way that is sufficiently deterministic or can be handled, such that now we are able to take this node and have anyone join the network. I'm talking in the future. We would be able to take the node and have anyone join the network with their own TEs, running our software, like the open source software that you would, of course, want to audit for yourself, and then participate in forming consensus about the new state of T1, which happens to depend on other components, such as the state of Arbitrum or the state of Scroll. And then once you have this reproducibility, this determinism, is it finally possible for you to apply this crypto economic mechanism of restaking, read eigenlayer AVS, where you keep some sort of bond, you require those node operators with the TEs to dedicate some bond, some slashable stake that should at some point in the future someone find out that a sufficiently high proportion of the TEs were both compromised and were made to sign off on something they shouldn't have, that even though the damage is done because the system finalized and the attacker stole the money, the stake that they have provided will be slashed and will be taken to reimburse the victim of the attack. And so now you can think, well, sounds great, but what if the attacker is able to steal $1 billion? Like, you guys are going to have a hard time attracting $1 billion of stake, right? So yeah, like depending on how the market develops, the restaking might make it more or less easy to attract some stake, but of course you don't want to be bound by just this restaked amount. And so we add a third layer of security on top of the crypto economic budget, and that we call bespoke ZKP. Bespoke to mean we keep track in the L1 side of the bridge going to T1 and back of the value at risk of the, say, in a simplified way, the withdrawals that were requested since the last ZKP checkpoint. And now, whenever we fear that the value at risk, you can think about the value in flight or something, approaches the crypto economic security budget, we incentivize more and more aggressively the submission of a ZK checkpoint, like on like a periodic checkpoint. And once such checkpoint is submitted, are we safely able, assuming the ZKP is of course secure and formally verified and all of this stuff, we would be able to safely reset our value at risk counter. And so this way we are able to avoid a situation where the value at risk, or like the total value secured by T1 exceeds the crypto economic budget, and therefore makes it rational, or makes it like, yeah, doable for a rational actor to misbehave, because they will be able to steal more than will be slashed away from them. And now there's going to be one final corner case that could happen, and that is this one situation where T1 will not be able to real-time prove its state towards the L1. And that situation is if in a single step between two L1 blocks, the value at risk that would be generated, like that would be added to since the last checkpoint, were to exceed the crypto economic security budget. In this situation, we would be actually halting the finalization of T1 on L1 and force that an on-demand ZKP checkpoint be provided, and only then would the system continue finalizing.
This is a very smart design with tiered security. So let's bring this to life to our listeners. If T1 works the way you imagine, what becomes possible that wasn't possible before?
What becomes possible is you go to your favorite dApp, and maybe it's a DEX. You get to trade at a rate that's not just a lot worse than Binance, but that approximates market conditions, because you have access, because the dApp has access to the liquidity across the board, across the ecosystem. And also, we have some nice cool features such as encrypted mempool, etc., that prevents any. But second, you would finally be able to go and run the trade on that would under the hood be run on Scroll, and use the output to do something, to take out this loan on Arbitrum under the hood, and then use that output of that loan to do the thing that you wanted to do in the first place, maybe buy the NFT on Optimism, like all in a single negligibly latent or with negligible delay interaction from a single dApp, and without actually having to go over manual bridging and back and forth.
Interesting. And obviously, great user experience as well.
We care about user experience. We want to be very pragmatic. This is our DNA. And I feel this is missing in crypto. Crypto is cool because it's so academic, because it's so research heavy, especially Ethereum. And it's also, it can be a problem. It can be difficult to prioritize for what users care about. And it can lead to Ethereum losing against competing ecosystems.
That's interesting. You mentioned, being pragmatic, and you also used that in some of your previous talks, that you're not a purist. And I get a sense that obviously in Ethereum, many people are often idealistic. So where does the mindset come from personally? Share with us some of the clashes that you might have when idealism clashes with what's actually workable.
Yeah, well, I used to be a purist myself. And
Okay, so when did the shift happen?
Yeah, I used to be a purist to the extent that when Richard Stallman, the new guy, like the free and open source software guy, came to give a talk at my university, it was the Technical University of Munich, and was given, I think it was an HDMI cable to connect his laptop to show the slides. He would decline, claiming, oh, HDMI is a proprietary standard. I'm not using proprietary things. And so he would just improvise without slides. So I used to be impressed by Richard Stallman. And then at some point, I founded the startup and I realized, oh, damn, it would be kind of valuable and useful and practical to be able to open this term sheet that an investor sent me in Microsoft Word format. Or you don't have Word on Linux. Word is proprietary software, right? Or, well, it would be kind of practical to be able to edit this Adobe Photoshop file for our website, right? And so I kind of started being a bit more 80-20 on that front. and would give up like this strict set of rules in exchange for what felt like a sensible compromise in terms of what you get out of it. And yeah, I think there's still a lot of the Orest during Richard Stallman's presentation time purism in Ethereum. And I think it's kind of maybe valuable and healthy in a way to have like this element and this anchor to that origin, that legacy, continue to assist us. And I feel it's also sensible to have a counterbalance, counterweight to that. And especially in this like modern day speculative bubble, like pump fun kind of era where the like first principles and original ideas and ethos seem to be like foreign words to many of the newcomers.
Like what you said, you 80-20, right? So you still keep the essence of being idealistic, but then you need to face reality, especially if you're doing your own startup. You need to have the amount of flexibility and pragmatic. So let's zoom out a little bit and look at Ethereum. Ethereum is going through a very interesting period, like a shift right now. The foundation is restructuring and scaling is still hitting new roadblocks, and the fragmentation issues, as you mentioned. So what do you think is missing from the current narrative around Ethereum, such as layer 2s and adoption?
I think it's a bit too early to tell. I'm a big fan of the Ethereum ecosystem, and I see the EF's role as essential there. And I also have a very personal connection to it. So I'm obviously very biased. And yet it seems like the changes and the, I guess, midpoint between evolution and revolution that's going on right now might be bearing fruit, and we don't know if and to what extent just yet. I think it's good that there's a lot of discussion going on. There's a lot of transparency when it comes to things that Ethereum as an ecosystem is struggling with. I think it's miserable that we continue to be using Twitter for those and Telegram on top. But yeah, let's do 80-20 and rejoice at the fact that we have a lot more open dialogue and a lot more rallying work being done as we speak. And this feels like it could work. So I'm very, very hopeful and enthusiastic about that.
That's great. And also you are based in Europe, right? So much of Ethereum spirit was born in Europe. And do you think that ethos still lives on? And yeah, obviously, as you said, it's still too early and you are biased, but that's all fine. So what role do you see Europe playing in the future of crypto as well?
I'm a big fan of Europe ever since I moved to the US, and then I actually moved back and we founded the company in Berlin, and then I would go and do fundraising in the US. Like every trip made me more happy about having this European anchor. And now with Ethereum, I feel there's such a huge gap between an event such as Protocol Berg in Berlin that's unfolding right now and something like, ETH Denver. Like it's literally like, here are the academics, and it's not just the website that looks like a paper. These are the people. And then you have like the price action talk, and it's very different.
Yeah.
But then again, it might also be this calibration work and ongoing effort, and hopefully some sort of pathfinding between this purist idealism that Berlin is absolutely known for and not for no reason, and the not just stereotypical American capitalism and American aggressiveness and outspokenness, etc., that we need. And I think it's great to try and cherry pick the different elements that an ecosystem needs in order to thrive from the different cultures, from the different geographies, from the different maybe mindsets even.
Yeah, I feel quite the same. It's completely different vibe if you go to East Denver versus the events in Europe. And I agree with you. We need to cherry pick the good things from each locations and cultures. And that is the beauty of crypto, because it's truly global. And it really brings down the barriers. And we've dedicated our show to the theme of crypto for good. So we try to ask every guest, what does that mean to you personally, crypto for good?
Well, this is a question that you get asked a lot, especially in Europe, especially once by accident you manage to leak, inadvertently, of course, that you happen to be working with blockchains. You, of course, don't say crypto. You try to be as cryptic as possible. So I say distributed systems, but some people guess it, and then you stand there. But the reality is, like, my motivation is, I feel there's a lot of efficiency to be gained in social coordination nowadays. And I mean specifically the coordination around financial systems, around things that have to do with institutions, with trust, with money, and turning, like, even the ability for a user or for a citizen of the world, or nowadays of a country, to have the ability to open up some way, like some account that allows them to receive stables, especially stables of a currency that is not necessarily the home currency. That's a big efficiency increasing and liquidity increasing, and I hope equity, like equality increasing measure that I hope crypto could lead to. And then there's a lot more. Like, if you think about what it means to open a bank account for your company, and then maybe like collect payments for your hairdressing services, it's terrible. Like, you are so vendor locked in, and there's a ton of moats and barriers, and it's so inefficient, and you just stick with whoever you happen to open the bank with in the first place, because it's the system is so far from efficient, so far from modular, from composable, really, or interoperable, and so it's pretty much the opposite of what I mentioned 20 minutes ago with respect to the Unix philosophy of having one tool for a job, but also the ability to interoperate between tools, to glue them together in a way that you as a user see fit. And of course, in the end, it's hopefully not going to be the user gluing those pieces together, but some organizations that provide some recommended setups for these things. So it could very well be in crypto and our economies, a wallet that comes with some sort of on-ramp, off-ramp, and some payments, and maybe some network under the hood, etc. But because the whole infrastructure would be running on a system that is modular, that is interoperable, that relies on a blockchain, once this is possible, we would be a lot less likely to be vendor locked in, or to be bound to some sort of artifact of, regulatory moat, for instance. So I view this as a very indirect contributor to like global happiness, but potentially a very high impact one regardless.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think beyond the hype and speculation and trading, blockchain and crypto really gives more power and empower individuals more and brings more efficiency. And we're still early. Thanks to students like you who build the infrastructure and who make things possible for all the great things to happen in the future.
Well, and unfortunately also the not so great things. And this is something I'm absolutely not proud of, all of the scams and money laundering and all of that. And I do feel it's actually not very conducive to like crypto for good goals, if I may misuse your term, that crypto does attract a lot of very strongly worded, say, anarchists or people who just feel the state is the worst thing that happened to humanity, etc. I think this is not a very pragmatic and reality compatible approach, aka Richard Stallman's HDMI.
Yeah, obviously technology is neutral. It is how people use it. We need to have more good people using that, and like the system, the architecture that you design to slash the bad actors, or we have different layers of security. And it's the same with AI. It's always going to be bad people who also master the technology and use it to do bad things. So the good people just need to catch up.
And my big hope is that ideally there's the light in the tunnel of not just hoping for the good people to be in majority and bad be in minority, but rather to design systems such that the incentives make it rational to be good.
Definitely.
I have, and maybe this is like the idealistic part of Orest. I do feel like this seems still like worth aspiring to and not completely utopic. Like having incentives and system rules and computationally imposed bounds such that the outcome that we expect, that the good outcome that we hope for, is actually something that we can expect rational actors to converge on, rather than hope that the good actors give up the rationally beneficial stance and do the good thing.
Yeah, definitely. The idealistic Orest makes sense. We need to design the system, right? We can't just trust human nature and just trust people would make the right choice. We do need to have designed a system that is trustless. And you've raised from A16Z, which is a huge milestone. So for fellow entrepreneurs or young people out there trying to build in crypto or tech, especially when the markets are bad in a bear market, what advice would you share with them?
Well, the same as dating. It's a numbers game. And yeah, of course, like you might not be able to land the first, like your number one favorite VC, especially if it's your first startup. But it's a numbers game, and of course there will be a lot of rejection. I think it's important to try and act upon feedback and stay agile and flexible, but also not get too discouraged and not assume that all of it is up to you, but rather assume from the get-go that you will. It's like sales also, like dating, sales, fundraising. I think they are fairly similar on that front. You need to assume that most interactions will end up in a no. Like 95. And then there will be a couple that will end up in a maybe. And then hopefully there will be one or a couple that will end up in a yes after a couple of more steps, probably.
That is a great piece of advice. You need to be resilient, basically, and be anti-fragile. Don't take things personally, because people can really get discouraged. They think that, oh, I didn't do it well. Oh my God, the idea sucks. But a lot of great startups, they all face a lot of rejections. When people first heard their ideas is bad ideas. But that is how they persevere and finally made it. And finally, for our listeners who are inspired by your journey, what's the best way for them to follow your work or support what T1 is building?
Well, unfortunately, our ecosystem is not as purist on this front. Go to x.com/T1 Protocol. Unfortunately, yeah. X is the outlet.
Follow T1's X account, and they share a lot of timely information about the protocol, about the development, and you can also follow Orest and the rest of the T1 team from there.
Yeah, we also have a Discord, and we're actively looking for builders to take advantage of those unique properties that I hinted at, in order to build your dream dApp, or maybe take a dApp that exists out there and expand it by our cross-chain capabilities. So please hit us up. Hit me up also. My DMs are open on X. Yeah, I would love to hear back from the community.
By the way, what is your next milestone? Share with us your upcoming milestones.
Our next big milestone is going to be a public testnet, which is going to focus on 7683. So that's intents and EIP for intents, bridging capabilities between two partner rollups. It's going to be Arbitrum and Base with a very fast repayment to solvers, which game theoretically leads to a lot more attractive a quote for the user. So you would be effectively paying a lot less in order to get your $100 bridged from Arbitrum to Base, because the guy under the hood would be able to turn the capital that they have around up to 60 times faster than elsewhere. And the second next big milestone will, of course, be our very first, very early version of our mainnet, which is basically going to be this testnet's feature set, but with real networks. And then the third milestone is going to be a full-blown rollup mainnet with permissionless block space for any purposes, not just 7683 bridges.
Best of luck with the testnets and looking forward to the eventual mainnet launch. Thank you, Orest, for sharing not just the architecture of T1, but also the deeper vision behind it. At a time when so much of the space is driven by hype and price charts, you remind us that it's still possible to build systems that are both grounded and meaningful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for trying to find the good in our ecosystem. I think that's really remarkable, Vivi.
Thank you. That was my conversation with Orest Tarasiuk, co-founder of T1 Protocol. We went deep from the scaling challenges of Ethereum to why real-time proving matters. But what struck me the most was something beyond the architecture, beyond the deep tech. Orest reminded us that in a world that is chasing speed and speculation, it's still possible to build with patience, clarity, and purpose. If you find this episode interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out our past episodes on YouTube and Spotify. At Vivi the Valley, we're here to explore tech with soul, not just what we build, but why it matters. So dear friends, stay curious, stay kind, and as always, keep building with soul.